Hello, everyone. I'm Bo from Brutal Commentary, and today I'm going to be doing our next breakdown for UFC Fight Night 263. In this matchup, we have Timothy Cuamba taking on Chang Ho Lee. Cuamba is 9-3 as a professional, 3-2 in his last 5 fights. Meanwhile, Lee is 11-1 as a professional, 5-0 in his last 5 fights. Looking at Cuamba, he's currently 1-2 in under the UFC. He fought Balaji Oki on short notice. Excuse me. At lightweight when he's mostly been a career featherweight. But honestly, Cuamba did pretty well for himself and fought Balaji Oki to a split decision. But then when he moved back down to featherweight, he took on Lucas Almeida, who beat him kind of thoroughly in their fight, where it was seemingly just Almeida's power was the difference maker in that matchup. But then Cuamba finally got his first win in the UFC when he knocked out Roberto Romero this April. Meanwhile, for Lee, he's currently 2-0 in the UFC. He won his UFC debut against Long Zhao last June in their road to the UFC finale, and then most recently defeated Cortavius Romeus this April as well. I gotta say, all things considered, this is honestly, I think, a well put together matchup. Both Lee and Cuamba have the same number of fights at 12. Their physical stats are pretty similar: 5'9" for Cuamba, 5'8" for Lee, then 71 inches in reach for Cuamba and 69 inches of reach for Lee. All in all, these two are very similar in that as well. I do feel like for Cuamba, however, this is more or less a make or break. Now, I don't know if he would get cut from the UFC if he were to lose this fight, but his only win in the UFC would be against a fellow fighter who was winless in the UFC, like Cuamba, until Cuamba got the win. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. Now, looking at their overall abilities for Cuamba, he's a kind of a fast twitch striker, really good with his feints as well. You saw it especially in the Romero fight, where he really good at fake pumping the jab, not even like throwing a jab all the time and committing to it, but just like setting it up with these little feints. And his ability to grapple is also sort of this fast twitch motion. That's kind of how Cuamba uses his striking and grappling. And specifically, the right hand of his is probably his best strike. Now, that being said, he's also can be very creative, like when he used the jumping switch knee to hit Romero straight in the face, or for example, in his fight with Oki when he hit some pretty good check left hooks. That's also he uses the check left hook to set up his right hand. That being now, another thing about Cuamba that I really like, I do like his cardio. He has gone 3 rounds before, and he has a pretty good consistent work rate, I would say. Though the big thing in this fight for me is this will be at bantamweight. As I said, Cuamba has always been kind of a career featherweight. Now, he's fought at lightweight at times before. Like I said, the Blachioki fight was at lightweight. But this will be Cuamba's first time at bantamweight. Now, I double checked, make sure that it wasn't Lee like moving up to featherweight, and because last time, like with Carolina versus Michelle Montague, I made the mistake of thinking Montague was moving down to flyweight and not bantamweight, and I wanted to make sure I was correct in my facts. And yes, so Cuamba is officially going to be moving down to bantamweight, which does play an interesting factor in this fight when it comes to who's going to be the stronger athlete of the two. But I'll get to that part in a little bit. As for Lee, while I would say Cuamba is more flashy and more quicker, and definitely, more. Sorry about that. Is definitely the quicker of the two. I will say I think Lee is much more relentless, as Lee's whole style is more on pressure. You notice is Lee oftentimes will constantly move forward. It doesn't matter what his opponent's going to throw at him. Lee's whole style is to move forward, get into the clinch, and from there use his dirty boxing like short range uppercuts and hooks while having the collar tie or get the full plumb in to start hammering knees to the body at his opponents. Now, as for the grappling aspect, Lee has very good body triangles, Now, there are at times where, for example, Romeus was able to turn Lee and get top position as Lee just wouldn't let go of the body triangle. So that is something I can see Cuamba using to his advantage. But overall, Lee, when he's on top, specifically like when he has the back and then back mount and starts hammering away with his ground and pound, his elbows and hammer fists are kind of ruthless. Lee's also has that sort of, well, he trains at a Korean top team, and you notice some of their style. It's how do I want to say what it? It's kind of like, say, I don't know, Dern for or Mackenzie Dern, for example, right, where they grab the head and then move it towards the elbow to create a bigger impact. Lee does that as well, or literally, just elbow in his opponent's head and force their head to hit the canvas. And for as well, it's not like pitter patter shots or like busy shots to stay active so the ref doesn't separate them. Lee's ground and pound is more so like single shots, but very impactful. You can clearly hear the impact they're making, like the audible thud, kind of like Brendan Allen's, for example, where you just like, actually hear it. Would be the best way I could say or describe Lee's ground and pound. Just simple, single shot thudding, more so for damage and fight ending than a stay busy type of strike. Now, the way these two meet up in the middle, it's basically is who can control the pace of the fight. For Cuamba, his path to victory, I see more so a volume heavy approach and just staying lateral, never letting Lee corral Cuamba to the fence or behind the black line is where I think Cuamba will win in this fight. If he keeps a smart tactical game, just like I said, control the pace by never letting Lee control him. For Lee, however, if Lee is able to keep a good constant pressure and good constant forward pace on Cuamba and make Cuamba fight off the back foot, Lee's going to have a lot of advantages because if you notice, Cuamba has a big weakness where if he is constantly pressured, he is more reactive than proactive. And there are times when his grappling and defensive wrestling and grappling start to show some of their, lapses in overall defense and just the holes in his game when it comes to that aspect of MMA. Now, looking at the odds for this fight, it's a pretty close fight, all things considered. Cuamba is minus 135, while Lee is a plus 110. I guess I can kind of see it. Maybe it's partially due to the age. Lee is 31, so he's in his prime, but at the same time, how much more upside does he have, and how much can he, just continuously improve his game as Lee is more or less now at the peak of his athletic prime, while Cuamba is 26, which shows, he also has much more room to grow as a prospect. But with that being said, I'm going to go with the underdog here. I'm going to go with Chang Lee. My biggest thing is, while pace is going to be a big determining factor in this fight, I think Lee's style is a natural counter to Cuamba. If you notice, fighters with more natural power also can kind of stifle Cuamba out of his game. That's kind of what Lucas Almeida did. Now, I don't think Lee hits as hard as Almeida, but he has a better pressure style that will force a lot of the defensive lapses in Cuamba's style to, I don't want to say this, kind of shed light on them, I guess be the word, or force them to the surface is, I think, a better metaphor to use. But basically, I think Lee's pressure is the biggest aspect of why I'm picking it. Not to mention, I think his grappling is going to be better than Cuamba's in this fight, especially his overall control. As if you notice, Lee has pretty good understanding of balance and overall like strong core, as well as the biggest X factor. How is Cuamba going to do in this fight, since this will be his first time at bantamweight? Because Lee's only ever really fought in this weight class, so he's used to the preparations of being able to be or maximizing his strength, his body, the way he knows how to fill into 135, in comparison to Cuamba, who we've not seen at 135. Now, Cuamba could, who knows? Cuamba could unlock some new abilities, like keep the same gas tank, carry his power, be faster, be able to transition, between striking and grappling much more seamlessly. I mean, there are times when a fighter changes weight classes and they become a whole different beast. It's quite possible. But right now, I just don't think that with the with the unknown of Cuamba moving down in weight class, while I have a more consistent fighter at who's fought in this weight class consistently with Lee, and not to mention who has won consistently at this weight class, I gotta go with Lee. As I said, his pressure is a big aspect of this fight. The unknowns with Cuamba at 135. And when, like I mentioned, with who can dictate the pace in this fight, and another big aspect is when I said Cuamba, his biggest thing, or sorry, his path to victory being circling around the cage and using good lateral movement and good high volume. They're in the apex. So, as you know, like the apex is going to be half the size of a normal octagon if it were, on the road, like say in Nashville, as a good example. So Lee is going to have a much easier time pressuring Cuamba to the fence and then get his game working. So all this being said, I'm going to go with Chang Ho Lee, and I'm going to pick him via decision. I had leaned towards a possible TKO, but Cuamba has survived some pretty heavy shots from both Balaji Oki and Lucas Almeida, and those are, I would say, harder hitters than Lee. But that being said, I could see Lee taking down Cuamba and possibly getting a TKO via ground and pound. That is a possibility. But my official prediction is I'm going to go with Chang Ho Lee, and I'm going to pick him via decision. So that being said, that's been my analysis for this fight. If you liked the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you overall thought of this analysis. Next up, we will have Kevin Christian taking on Billy Alakan. But until then, I've been Bo from Brutal Commentary. Thank you all for listening. Take care.